Historic ice storm slams the southeast causing deadly road conditions, 3,500 flight cancellations and it's rolling north. Worsening storm stretched from eastern Texas to the Carolinas, and is likely to reach up into the middle Atlantic states by late on Wednesday. City schools have been closed until Thursday and emergency preparations began in earnest on Monday morning. Storm to dump more snow on the northeast through Wednesday night into Friday. State of emergency declared in Georgia where government will be closed on Wednesday. A deadly winter storm packing ice, sleet, and heavy snow hit the southeastern U.S. on Wednesday, threatening road and air travel and widespread power outages, forecasters said. The worsening storm stretched from eastern Texas to the Carolinas, and is likely to reach up into the middle Atlantic states by late on Wednesday, National Weather Service meteorologist Roger Edwards said. It's unusual to have an ice storm that far east in the deep south, he added. Winter storm packs will then move northeast through Wednesday night into Friday, impacting the heavily populated I-95 corridor. The snow will start on Wednesday night in the middle Atlantic, affecting Washington, Baltimore and Philadelphia. Snow should arrive in New York City after midnight, then wallop the rest of the Northeast into Thursday morning, including Albany, Boston, Hartford and Bangor, Maine. Airlines halted more than 3,300 flights into the region through to Thursday, with Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the world's busiest, deserted as it cancelled almost 2,500 flights up until 5 p.m. on Wednesday. President Obama signed an emergency declaration for Georgia, where the state government will be closed on Wednesday, and governors in other southern states declared weather emergencies. Officials were quick to make plans for dealing with the weather after facing criticism when a storm 2 weeks ago paralyzed Atlanta area roads and forced more than 11,000 students in Alabama to spend the night at their schools. Conditions worsened overnight as a swath of the deep south from Alabama through South Carolina was hit with rain, sleet, and snow, and residents were steadying themselves for freezing rain and slick roads, Edwards said. The morning commute is just going to be horrendous, Edwards said, warning of impassable roads, traffic accidents, and thick ice bringing down trees and power lines. Folks who are not accustomed to handling these conditions are best served by staying out of them, staying indoors, staying off the roads. The storm dumped 2 to 6 inches of snow in North Georgia on Tuesday. But ice was the larger concern on Wednesday, as 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch was expected in a broad section of Georgia, including metropolitan Atlanta. Some areas could see more than 1 inch. The Interstate 20 corridor from north-central and northeastern Georgia into South Carolina would be among the hardest hit by icy conditions, Edwards said. The storm has already caused 2 weather-related traffic deaths in Mississippi, and 3 in northern Texas, authorities said. Panicked residents in metro Atlanta, fearful of a repeat of January's 2 inches of chaos, cleared supermarket shelves as they prepared to stay at home, having heard forecasters declare that Wednesday's storm could be of historic proportions. The empty roads came in stark contrast to the bumper-to-bumper traffic that inched along highways and forced people to sleep in their cars amid the winter storm 2 weeks ago. 2 to 6 inches of snow fell in North Georgia on Tuesday, with another 5 to 9 inches expected by Thursday morning, said National Weather Service meteorologist Dan Darb. The rain was expected to turn to sleet and freezing rain, and the ice coating was forecast for today. The winter storm could bring a thick layer of ice and cause widespread power outages for days, potentially to millions of people. Delta, which operates its busiest hub in Atlanta, cancelled more than 1,400 flights nationwide across Tuesday and Wednesday. U.S. Airways, which operates a major hub out of Charlotte, cancelled more than 330 flights on Tuesday and another 540 on Wednesday. Of the 1,940 preemptive Wednesday cancellations counted by FlightAware as of 6 p.m. on Tuesday, about half came from Atlanta and Charlotte airports. But, if the storm comes anywhere near to predictions, it is expected that up to 10,000 flights will be cancelled through till Friday, when the storm is expected to disperse. So bad are the backlogs in hotels across Atlanta and the South that Delta is allowing its staff to sleep in their planes because they cannot find them rooms to stay in. When asked to elaborate on the catastrophic warning, Brian Hoth, a meteorologist at the service's Southern Regional Headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas, said forecasters were talking about an ice storm that happens only once every 10 to 20 years for the area. Forecasters predicted crippling snow and ice accumulations as much as 3/4 of an inch in area from Atlanta to central South Carolina. Wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour could exacerbate problems. Eli Jacks, a meteorologist with National Weather Service, said forecasters use words like catastrophic sparingly. Sometimes we want to tell them, hey, listen, this warning is different. This is really extremely dangerous and it doesn't happen very often, Jacks said. This kind of language was first used in May 19, 1999 for a tornado in Moore, Oklahoma. Forecasters called it a tornado emergency to make sure the public knew it was not a typical tornado. I think 3/4 of an inch of ice anywhere would be catastrophic, Jacks said. But the Atlanta area and other parts of the South are particularly vulnerable because there are so many trees and limbs hanging over power lines. When the ice builds up on them, limbs snap and fall, knocking out power. There is no doubt that this is one of Mother Nature's worst kinds of storms that can be inflicted on the South, and that is ice. It is our biggest enemy, Georgia Governor Nathan Deal said. If you get even a 1/10 of inch of ice on a road, it's like a skating rink, said Kurt Van Spabroek, a National Weather Service meteorologist in Dallas. The forecast drew comparisons to an ice storm in the Atlanta area in 2000 that left more than 500,000 homes and businesses without power, and an epic storm in 1973 that caused an estimated 200,000 outages for several days. In 2000, damage estimates topped $35 million. So far, this storm has caused 2 weather-related traffic deaths in Mississippi, and 3 in northern Texas, authorities said. A Dallas firefighter responding to an accident on an icy road also died when a skidding car hit a parked vehicle and he fell off a highway bridge. Officials were quick to make plans for dealing with the weather after being criticized for inadequate preparation before a storm 2 weeks ago. That storm paralyzed Atlanta area roads and forced more than 11,000 students in Alabama to spend the night at their schools. While only light rain fell in Atlanta on Tuesday, cities 40 miles northwest saw 2 to 3 inches of snow. The rain was expected to turn into sleet and freezing rain overnight. More than 200 utility vehicles from Florida, North Carolina and other southern states gathered in a parking lot near one of the grandstands at Atlanta Motor Speedway. The goal was to make sure at least 2 interstate lanes were available in each direction. Then material would be used on the most heavily used roads off the highways. Officials were also considering rerouting traffic in extreme circumstances. It's certainly going to be a challenge for us. Ice is definitely different than snow, said State Transportation Commissioner Keith Golden. It is very difficult for us to plow ice. Hundreds of Georgia National Guard troops were on standby in case evacuations were needed at hospitals or nursing homes, and more than 70 shelters were set to open. President Barack Obama declared a state of emergency in Georgia, ordering federal agencies to help the state and local response during the storm. Deal said a priority for that request was generators. Metro Atlanta, the economic engine of the South with the headquarters of Fortune 500 companies including Home Depot, UPS, Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola, resembled a ghost town. Schools were closed and grocery store shelves were bare of milk and bread. State and local officials, chastened by tough criticism for their slow response to the January 28 storm, were eager to prove they could handle winter storms. On Monday, before a drop of freezing rain or snow fell, Deal declared a state of emergency for nearly a third of the state, and state employees were told they could stay home. He expanded the declaration Tuesday to more than half the state's counties. Aaron Strickland, Emergency Operations Director for Georgia Power, said the utility is bringing in crews from Florida, Texas, Oklahoma and Michigan. Strickland, who has spent 35 years with Georgia Power, said he's never seen an inch of ice in Metro Atlanta. "I've seen people forecast it, but it's never come," Strickland said. "And I'm hoping it don't this time." Atlanta has a painful past of being ill-equipped to deal with snowy weather. Despite officials' promises after a crippling ice storm in 2011, the January 28 storm proved they still had many kinks to work out. On Tuesday, hundreds of schools and offices were closed from Texas to North Carolina, and more closures were planned for Wednesday. "This is not the storm we had 2 weeks ago, where we were playing in the snow and building snowmen. This is an ice storm," South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley said. Central South Carolina is expected to get up to 1.5 inches of ice over the next 48 hours. The National Guard was put on alert and shelters prepared in the state. State transportation workers in North Carolina sprayed nearly 2 million gallons, 7.6 million liters of salt brine on roads ahead of the storm, the governor's office said. Schools have canceled classes, and Deal urged people who didn't need to be anywhere to stay off the roads. Tractor-trailer drivers were handed flyers about the weather and a law requiring chains on tires in certain conditions. "We are certainly ahead of the game this time, and that's important," Deal said. "We are trying to be ready, prepared and react as quickly as possible." Tony Hardy said he was trying to get out of the incoming weather. He lives at a homeless shelter and said he fell 3 times on ice during the last storm. This time, he said, planned to shelter in his sister's house. "It's going to last for a couple of days," he said. In northeastern Alabama, slick roads were also causing wrecks. Michelle Owen, of Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, was driving north on Interstate 65 near Coleman, Alabama, when she hit an icy patch on a bridge. Her sport utility vehicle and a trailer it was pulling fishtailed, sending her 18-year-old son Tyler through the rear window and onto the car that was atop the trailer. "He wound up on top of the Mustang we were hauling," Owen said. He suffered only minor injuries. Northeast Mississippi expected as much as 4 inches of snow, and South Carolina, which hasn't seen a major ice storm in nearly a decade, could get 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch of ice and as much as 8 inches of snow in some areas. Some residents took note of officials' change in attitude for this storm. Kevin Paul, a barber, sat in an empty shop watching TV coverage of the storm Tuesday. Paul was critical of the response from Deal last month. "I think that they should have done better," Paul said. "I think they were preoccupied with other things." But Paul noted Deal seems to be paying far more attention this time. In January, Deal and Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed did not hold their first news conference until hours after highways were jammed. When the January 28 storm hit, Deal was at an awards luncheon with Reed, who was named a magazine's 2014 Georgian of the Year. Reed had just tweeted, "Atlanta, we are ready for the snow." This time, the mayor made no such predictions. Instead, he said he was in contact with school leaders and the city had 120 pieces of equipment to spread salt and sand and plow snow. The National Guard had 1,000 four-wheeled drive vehicles to help anyone stranded. "We are just going to get out here and, flat out, let our work speak for itself," Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed said. Much is at stake for the governor, a Republican who is up for re-election, and Reed, who is seen as a rising star in the Democratic Party and has aspirations for higher office. Both took heat from residents, forecasters and even comedians during the last storm. Saturday Night Live spoofed a storm survivor with a thick Southern accent. "The sun will rise again," the character said at one point. Jon Stewart quipped, "The Ice Age zombie doomsday apocalypse has come to Atlanta."